Reach out to Ajay Unni. He's the founder and CEO of StickmanCyber. He's been in the industry for a very long time, for 16 years, and he's been working on this business for 16 years, or probably longer. You've been in the industry for longer than that, Ajay. And his business deals with small to medium businesses, really helping them with their cyber security. He's got some great information, which I think will really help you guys as contract paraplanners, and some good tips to how to protect yourselves and your data that you use every single day. So I will hand over to Ajay now to go through his pack. And thank you again for doing this session, Ajay. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for inviting us to speak. It is definitely a pleasure. I do quite a few of these webinars, but this is the first time to the Paraplanner community. I've done this for financial advisors community a few months ago. I think it was sometime last year. So it's also very interesting. I learn about new kind of businesses and new types of professionals like you. I never really knew that there was a paraplanner kind of role existed in the industry. I knew about paralegal. So I was reading up a bit, and it's very interesting to know how there's such a big industry around this. So very excited, and I hope I can help you all today better understand and how to prevent cyber attacks. And more importantly, feel free to use the control panel of Zoom. There is a chat icon on the control panel, or a Q&A panel too. So you can click there, post your questions. I'll be keeping an eye on the questions, and I'll try and answer them through the webinar or towards the end. And at the end of the webinar, we'll wait for some more time just to answer any of your questions. Also, there's going to be a small poll at the end of the webinar, so feel free to stay back and take the poll before we finish up the webinar. So thank you once again, Melanie, and welcome everyone. And I hope you get value out of this session. So let's get straight into it, everyone. So we'll skip this slide. You can see this in the recording. So that was a bit about myself, but we'll straight get into what a cyber attack really is, right? And essentially, we'll go through 4 key areas today. So understanding what a cyber attack is, what's the impact of the attack, what is cybersecurity, and then 10 ways to protect your business, right? So those are the 4 key agenda items of today's session. So essentially, 2 types of attacks, right? There's an outsider threat and an insider threat, and that's the distinction you have to first draw upon. And every time I do cybersecurity, I look at it from the physical world standpoint, because as human beings, we have been, since childhood, we've been trained, to look for threats, right? If you're going into a particular area in the city, we are told just be careful at so and so time, right? If you live in a certain kind of a suburb, there are different types of a threat out there. So the outsider, insider. So the distinction here is some threats obviously are from the outside, some are from the inside. So that's again goes back to the distinction of, you look at a particular suburb or an area, there could be threats into that suburb from the outside or from inside the suburb itself, or there could be office buildings where there could be a threat which will generate from the inside or a threat from the outside. So same concept. I always tell all my customers, even the large ones, to always try to draw parallels with the physical world and the cyber world. It's not really different, but it gives you a quite easy way to distinguish, right? So when you look at the outside, there's obviously organized crime, state-sponsored, hacktivists, and hobbyists, right? These are the good old stories of, teenage kids sitting in the basement and trying to hack. Hacktivists are people like, activists who are trying to, make a point. State-sponsored essentially means, governments funding to attack. So what's happening now, unfortunately, between Russia and Ukraine, apparently Russia is investing in cyber attacks on Ukraine, and countries who are supporting Ukraine and in that instance. And there's been a notification from the Australian Cybersecurity Center giving a red alert to all businesses in Australia, saying beware of cyber attacks, because state-sponsored attacks can be quite devastating, right? And we have seen quite a few of these in the history over the last few years, right? Organized crime is basically very focused on making money. So they are the ones who are launching this ransomware attacks in return for getting paid so that then they can, unencrypt your devices. When you look at insider threats, it's staff, business partners, clients, contractors, suppliers with access to your system. So somebody who's, disgruntled or malicious, or someone who's just negligent, who doesn't follow a security policy. So that threat can originate from the inside. And number one is obviously the most prevalent one. There are few we have dealt with disgruntled and malicious staff. Some of it can be quite devastating because they have higher privileges. It's like you've given the keys to the cleaner in your building. They have access to all the rooms, and even in your home, for example. Now, there is a trust level with which you give that keys, but then if they're disgruntled or malicious, then imagine what kind of impact they can have having that kind of access. So insider threats is a whole different ball game. We can deal with that. It's dealt with in a very different way than outsider threats. Moving forward, what do they target? So what are these targets looking for? Obviously, business and financial data, trying to target your infrastructure, get access to it, targeting your customer database, including personal identifiable information, complete takeover of your system, client list, financial data, email addresses, and login details such as passwords. Now, a lot of people say, Ajay, why? I've got an antivirus, right? But you may use your username and password on multiple different websites, right? And you may use the same username and password. I noticed many of you have registered to this webinar using your Gmail, and you're using your Outlook accounts and non-business oriented accounts. Now you may use that same email ID and a similar combination of a password to access. Obviously, to register to this webinar, you didn't have to give away any passwords, but I'm just giving you the scenario. What happens really is that you may use your email address and password combination on multiple websites, which are almost exactly the same. So even if one of those websites get hacked, what hackers are doing is they're creating a massive, huge database of email and password combinations. So let's say you work for a company, and the company is called abcfinancialadvisors.com, and you use, Ajay at abcfinancialadvisors.com and a password combination to log in their systems, but you use the same combination to log into, Facebook or Twitter, or you create multiple accounts in different sites. And if one of those get hacked, what hackers really do is they take that domain name and then they come back to that company's domain and try to use the same username and password to gain access, right? That's why email addresses and password combinations have become the easiest way for the hackers to get in. Think of it from their standpoint. I always say hackers also want return on their investment, and they're investing what is called as time, right? So they want to get in and get out as quickly as possible with the limited amount of effort. So it's like if someone is trying to break into an office building or a home, if they have access to the key, that's the easiest way they can get it, right? Without damaging the doors and without causing any noise, or if the door is left open. So always try to draw parallels between as I said, the physical world and the cyber world. So these are the normal targets. Moving forward, what are the types of attacks? So we touched upon ransomware in the previous slide. Most people are aware of these types of attacks now. So ransomware, like in the physical world, taking humans for ransom, they take your computer for ransom, meaning they will lock in your computer, they'll gain access to your PC, they'll completely lock it down, and then you will only have access to a screen where they'll say, we have now control of your computer, and we have encrypted it, and the only way you can decrypt it is by paying us some money, and then we'll give you the decryption scheme. The only other way to get out of that is you completely reinstall the computer from scratch. Essentially, you lose all your data, what was on your PC, right? Now, some people can do that if all the data is in the cloud. Now, always remember, if they have access to your PC and they've already logged in, they may also have access to your cloud systems or cloud file storages, right? So that's why that username and password combination is very critical. And we'll talk about how to protect in the following slides. But always remember, you've got your PC, you're storing data on that PC or computer, but you may also have cloud storages where you're storing. So if someone has gained access to your PC itself, remember they may also get access to your cloud storage and shut them down too. So always be careful, and we'll go through elements of how to protect those aspects. Denial of service may not be really relevant to your kind of businesses because you're mostly sole traders. But what that essentially means is, hackers send traffic onto the website or onto your computer network. They send malicious traffic, which brings the site down. So a couple of years ago, you must have, if you remember, there was the Australian federal voting website came to a grounding halt on the day when they launched it because, one, there were a lot of Australians trying to log in, and there was also apparently a denial of service attack on that website at that point in time to bring the website down, basically. So it's like the analogy here in the physical world is there is a highway, there's a road, and this is an accident, but if that road can service only 1,000 vehicles, imagine if 20,000 vehicles came on that road, what will happen? You'll have a gridlock, right? And in gridlocks, you could have accidents too, and that's what we're trying to represent from the physical world to the cyber world, right? Moving forward, the other two common types is the phishing and social engineering, kind of similar in nature. So phishing is, they act as, you get an email from someone saying that, hey, please click on this link to, because your bank account is shut down or some other information has been changed, or it looks like from your IT service provider who's saying, hey, can you please, click on this link and reset your password? Because so always be careful of emails which has links and which are directing you to then provide additional information for you to provide, right? Always question, look at the URL. So whenever you get a link embedded in an email, right click on it and copy the URL and paste it on the browser before you can actually click enter, because when you read the URL,
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
That's my Siri trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. So when you copy and paste the URL, so if you get an email which looks like from Combank, right, or ANZ or any bank, what I normally do is I right click on that link, copy it in memory, paste it onto the browser, then I read the link very carefully, right? Most of the times, if it's a phishing attack, you will notice that it won't be anz.com or cba.com. It will be something else, right? It will be a look-alike kind of a URL, and that's what you have to keep an eye out, and that's where you protect yourself from phishing. Social engineering is a little bit more sophisticated. Here, the hacker is posing as someone trusted within your network, trying to gain information similar to phishing, but it's more sophisticated. They may send you a legitimate email asking you to enter details, and then you're getting, a request for providing your username and password and so on and so forth. So both are mostly email generated. Some are outside from LinkedIn and other sources too. And I get quite a few of these LinkedIn requests saying, hey, join this particular, community, or, please, enter your details here to qualify to become part of this community and so on and so forth. So just be careful whenever you're providing information to sources you're not aware of or not really known to you, right? So just always double check that before going forward. This slide has a few more: cryptojacking, zero-day exploits, business email compromise, a whole bunch of different types. Some are technical, so I won't go into that. But zero-day exploit is a great one as an example, because zero-day exploit is essentially, like most of you are sole traders. Just going to close this window while I'm speaking. There's some noise coming from the outside. So zero-day exploits is a great example of, let's say you have phones and you have desktops or laptops. If you're not patching them, so if you're using Windows or Microsoft or Apple laptops and phones, always make sure you're updating to the latest patches, which you get from notification from Windows and Apple, right? So if you don't, zero-day exploit is basically a vulnerability which has been found on day zero, and there is no patch for it, right? And the moment it is found, that's when hackers are then trying to exploit your computer. So always keeping your systems up to date is going to be the best way to protect yourself from such kind of attacks. So we'll go through the next part of the presentation, which is basically what's the impact of an attack, and we'll go through some stats too. So the Australian Cybersecurity Center runs a lot of small business surveys. So this is a survey done in 2020. So one report every 10 minutes is what they have received in terms of cyber attacks from small businesses. 300 million spent on cybercrime. That's the estimated losses. And then 1763 responses received by voluntary responses by the ACSC, right? So we are seeing a significant growth over here, and we'll talk about how that impacts the business. But they also ran a survey, right? 62% of respondents have experienced a cyber incident of some kind of, so that's quite significant. That's 62% of small businesses. So you all are small traders, but small businesses itself have had significant, and some of them are kind of sole traders, maybe one or two staff members, right? Most of them rated their cybersecurity as average or below average. 1 in 5 were not even aware of the term phishing, right? And half of the SMBs reported they spend less than $500 on cybersecurity. So there's a big confusion between what this whole cybersecurity actually means, and we'll cover that in the next few slides too, right? And we'll come to that very soon. So finally, the impact is, basically the cyber attack is trying to get you to disable your systems, get you to stop operating, delete information, allow hackers to enter into your system to steal valuable information, or just crash your systems entirely, right? Ultimate objective is, some kind of impact to your business so that you're inoperable or you will have to pay some money to go forward. I love this slide. I call this distortions of cybersecurity, right? These are like, it won't happen to us. If it happened, how did it happen? Why did it happen? Or why should we spend all this money? It's all too getting complicated. We'll worry about this later. So there are different types of thought distortions which go through with businesses, right? Because mainly, and every time I've questioned myself over the last 17 years, I've worked with some very small businesses to very large businesses. And I've seen these thought distortions go through primarily because, it's a change, right? We are used to living life in a particular way. We were introduced to this amazing thing called computers and internet, which made life so easy. We could contact people at a click of a button. We could send documents, faxes. It was just amazing, right? I take the analogy of planes, right? If you had to go visit our family, before planes, we had to spend hours and days in buses and road trips and trains. But then in an hour's time, you could reach a different city, which is 500 kilometers away from you. So when with convenience comes risk too, and that's essentially what happened when planes came in. I still remember I could walk up to literally the aircraft and say goodbye to my dad when he would go flying. But then they started putting barriers. Then there was a balcony. The balconies were amazing because that was like in this open air. You're watching the passengers walking towards the aircraft. And then they started putting glasses. And then now some countries, you can't even enter the airport if you're not flying, right? So as and when the security risk increased, the distance between access to that particular service also increased, right? Same is happening with computers and the internet and cyber threat, right? As and when the threat levels are increasing, it's becoming more and more difficult, right? And the real challenge here is awareness. So if I go back 20 years ago, when I used to stand in the security queue, there were people who would joke with the security staff saying, "Oh, do you think I've got a bomb on me? Why are you scanning me?" So they took, further measures. They started putting brochures in the security area saying if you say anything, it could be taken against you and you could miss your flight, right? So people then started realizing, oh, I better follow the rules rather than crack a joke and think I can get away with it. So again, going back to remember physical security and draw parallels with internet and cybersecurity for you to better understand. So these distortions may happen. It's fine. I've had it myself. So the point where I'm coming with this is, the best way is to become more aware, right? It's like, my doctor saying, Ajay, eat less and exercise more and you lose weight. Yeah, awareness is there, but action is also important. So first is awareness. Before it impacts my health, I should take some action, which I am taking, thankfully. Same with cyber. We will start with awareness, we build the knowledge, and then we take action. So same process holds good here. We'll go through some quick real world case studies, right? These are some really small businesses, so 1 to 10 employees to some slightly larger ones. But this happened around 2020, which essentially, this was a senior person in a co-founder of a business clicking on a phishing email, thinking it's like a Zoom link, which installed a malware, and then literally they were able to transfer funds of over $2 million, which led to literally the closure of this whole financial services company, right? And also they lost some large investors in that process, right? And we'll talk about how these could have been prevented in the following slides after this, but just get present to this fact, right? How impactful these kind of stories can be, right? And with your business, you may be storing a lot of personal identifiable information. You may be storing it in Excel sheets and Word documents. One of the things I say is, when it comes to that level, as a sole trader, and I've been a sole trader myself many years ago, the point is you should be aware that you're storing something precious. Now your clients may not be knocking on your door and saying, oh, tell me how are you protecting my data, but we have a duty of care, right? So simple things like, I see a lot of even large businesses, they'll download all their customer data onto an Excel sheet, attach it to an email and just send it to their marketing, outsourced company to say, okay, please print out these letters and, or email them. But when they download that Excel sheet, I say, well, if you are doing an email campaign, why didn't you just send the email address and the first name? Why did you have to send the first name, the last name, the full address, and all the sensitive information about that customer? Because it was easy to download from the database and then email it. But I'm like, take the time to cut out the columns you don't need. Encrypt that file by putting a password. This is all default available in Microsoft Word, for example, or Excel. You could protect that file with a password, send the password as a text message and email this, and put these simple basic measures, to not have to deal with this kind of, breaches, right? Which can be quite significant to a business, right? At the end of the day. There's another cryptocurrency agency, we didn't know what the end outcome was, but 270,000 account holders data was lost, sensitive information exposed. It was not very sure, whether they ended up paying back or what actually happened in terms of fixing the issue. But that is one example of another small business. This is another one where there was a ransomware. Again, June 2020, files were encrypted. We are not sure whether they paid the ransom, but this was another incident which happened in an accounting firm in Victoria. I'm told that this is a very prominent case. Our advice group, they were part of obviously a much larger group owned by ANZ Bank, but there is ASIC is still seeking penalties for lack of basic cybersecurity, right, within a business, right? And we'll talk about basic cybersecurity in a few slides, right? So these are a few case studies, which you can get present to. it might not have happened to, and this is a classic case of like home insurance and car insurance and life insurance. Like these are all things like, we say, oh, it won't happen to us, right? And then we don't take the relevant measures, right? But there's also this concept, oh, I've got insurance, so I'll be fine, right? But like I broke my arm the other day, right? Just about a week ago. Well, I have medical insurance, they fixed me up. It didn't cost me a penny, but I was inoperable for about 4 or 5 days, right? So insurance is fine, right? Not expecting things may not happen is fine. But the point here is, are we taking care of ourselves, right? As in, from a cyber standpoint, are we doing the right thing? And what are we doing to, not to be in a situation where I have to claim insurance and get admitted, right? And in the cyber world, go call somebody to say, hey, fix my computer, and then spend money to fix it. So what steps can you take to protect yourself? So cybersecurity is a practice of protecting systems, networks, and programs from digital attacks, right? Implementing effective cyber measures is particularly challenging today because there's more devices than people, and attackers are becoming more innovative, right? So when you think about this, we are living in a world which is, very seamlessly getting integrated with digital. There's nothing in the next 10 years, like everything we touch will be some kind of software code sitting behind it. There are already, homes with kettles which are connected to the internet, and fridge is connected, and your cooktop is connected, and your microwave is connected. We're going to live in this world, and if we don't take security seriously, and we will just assume and expect it to come completely secure, it's like, they build cars today which are supposed to be safe. But if we don't use that car and don't wear the seat belt and don't not drive it properly, it can be quite a fatal killing machine, if it really wants to be, right? Same thing with digital technology. Don't take it for granted saying, oh, it should be all fine. We should also make an effort to learn how to use these technologies in a secure way. So what does it entail? It entails people's processes and systems and technologies, right? I'll just take a quick break. Just checking some messages come through. It's not a question, so that's fine. So basically, people, processes, and technology. So this is the combination, right? When you look at security, it's like same thing, right? The technology is, if I take an analogy of the car, the technology is the car, the process is how you're going to drive it, and the people are us, right? So same concept, comparing it to physical world to technology. So you have your computer, you've got your systems, you've got your cloud storage, you've got your applications. There is a process you use to, use those computers, and you as a person needs to do some basic principles in using that. And that's when the security principles come into play on how you're going to use them, right? So if you look at it, some of the myths, security is a responsibility of the IT department, right? It's not my problem. Cyber criminals don't target SMEs. Like, really, at the end of the day, they are, especially the criminals, may not be the activists or the others. The criminals are after quick money, right? So I had a situation, a client, not a client, but a client's reference came to me saying, hey, my Instagram account has been hacked, right? Now, this is also becoming very prevalent. Now, hackers are saying, okay, social media has become big, right? Like, you may have LinkedIn followers, or you may have Instagram, or you may have Facebook, where you're storing your personal data, right? Now, in this instance, they're a not-for-profit. Their Instagram account was hacked. They took over, and the reason being, the simple thing, right? They used a username and password, which was harvested from the dark web. The hacker used the same username and password to log in, and they changed the target email address based on which the account was registered, right? And within a few seconds, they had 47,000 followers on Instagram, and they literally lost access to that whole thing, right? So imagining, and this is a charity of run by 3 or 4 people, right? And it was just devastating. Luckily, we were able to recover that for them. And it was just a miracle how it happened, but Instagram was very helpful to the process because we could give a lot of evidence that that account belonged to this particular charity. So coming back to this, please never ever think that you can't be a target. You may be a sole proprietor, but you store data, and even if you don't store data, they may target you to put a ransomware and ask, money to uncover it, right? And we'll talk about strategies of how not to be that and how to protect yourself from that such a situation. Or you have a third party who will do everything for you. Cyber threats are, only, from external sources, and we have invested in all the sophisticated technology. Yeah, you may have a very sophisticated technology, or you may have a very sophisticated car, which has got all the bells and whistles of protecting yourself. But if you don't wear the seatbelt and don't drive in the speed limit, you could still end up getting into a severe accident. So using the technology is also very important in that distinction, what you bring to the table. So we're almost towards the end of the presentation. Just checking in, I might have gone a bit fast. How are we going, Melanie? All good at your end?
Yeah, very interesting. I haven't seen any questions or chat yet, but
Sure.
yeah, no.
So we've got a couple of more slides. So start preparing your questions, everyone. Happy to answer them. But we've kind of created a slide which kind of summarizes, this is mainly your takeaway, right? So the first thing says monitoring, detection of back-to-base alarm. So think about it like you may have a home with a back-to-base alarm system, right? An alarm system with sensors inside your home or your office. When it goes off, there is a back-to-base alarm system, meaning somebody in the base gets to know that there's been a breach inside the house or the office, right? The same concept is there for the computer world, which we call the monitoring, detection, response, or just to make it simple, simple terminology, we call it also back-to-base alarm system for your computer network. Now, this is something, so people say, oh, but I've got a lock in the house. But yeah, that's the whole idea, right? If a thief is able to break into the house through the window or break the lock and enter the house, you wouldn't know till you get into the house after your, Friday night drinks or party or whatever, oh, you've had a break-in, right? But if you had the back-to-base alarm system, it would trigger the alarm. You could, they would call you. Unfortunately, you may have to leave your party to go and check on your house, or you could call your neighbor to say, hey, check, or you could ask the security company to go and check, right? Obviously, I've seen businesses have this, and that's a great example from a physical world standpoint, right? So that's one of the key things we recommend having. And ACSC, which is the Australian Cybersecurity Center, just last week recommended all businesses to have this in place, right? Next thing is vulnerability management, which we kind of touched upon in my previous slides, which is, patching your systems, right? Before you patch your systems, you need to know whether your systems are vulnerable or not. So you need to have a vulnerability management program to ensure that there's somebody running some kind of a scan to check it's beyond antivirus. So we'll talk about antivirus in a second. This is beyond. So antivirus is working on, okay, there is something you have downloaded, you've opened, and then it's triggered, and then it's opening that particular the antivirus trigger, and then asking you to fix those issues, right? Vulnerability management is before the attack even happens, right? So it's trying to say that, hey, there are 2 windows open in your home, so please close the windows before you exit, right? Same way, the vulnerability management is running scans on your systems to check if there are any open vulnerabilities which can be exploited by an attacker. Right? The third area we touched upon too in the few slides is training, awareness, and phishing campaigns. Right? So training and awareness is key, because this is where I think the entire industry or the entire human race is so unprepared for, right? I use this example of, when the first tsunami ever came in history, right? People looked at it and said, oh, wow, this is a big wave, right? What's it going to do? But it wiped out communities, right? And then we learned about tsunamis, right? And then now we are prepared for a tsunami, and then we can prepare for volcanoes, we can prepare for for tornadoes and stuff like that. So it's like we're not prepared as a human race. We're just not prepared for cyber attacks, whether it's a large business, small business. People are spending millions of dollars in this space, but it comes down to people at the end of the day. Unfortunately, we can take control by being aware and teaching ourselves and becoming more knowledgeable. Then comes the action. So this third area is getting you trained, making you aware. Phishing campaigns are, there are programs which will simulate a phishing email to you and your business, and you click on the link, then you learn through that process. So you're actually clicking, or if you don't click, that's great. If you click, then you're basically getting some additional knowledge there in terms of how a phishing campaign would look like. How can somebody attack your systems and gain information from you, right? So that's the first three things. Then comes security, things like security penetration testing. So testing your systems and websites for security alerts. Now, this may not be relevant for your business because you may not have a website or any such application. You may be working off the financial advisory firm's details. So we can park that for the second. Then policy procedures, same way. That's basically for your cybersecurity policies and standards, again, for a large business or a small business. Data encryption will be relevant to your business. If you are using Windows, there's something called BitLocker within Windows. It's a free tool. Switch it on, right? That's all I can say. It's as simple as that. Multi-factor authentication, same thing. So if you log into your email, get a second factor. Second factor is like an SMS message saying, please enter this code before you can log in. If you're logging into your social media profiles or your SaaS platforms like Dropbox or something, enable most of the providers offer you multi-factor authentication absolutely free. So please take advantage of that. So that creates a second layer of login, which then lets the hacker won't be able to get in, right? Because he needs the second, which is held on your phone, right? So if they get hold of your username and password, so in our business, every 24 hours to go back into my email, I enter my username and password, and then I get a prompt on my phone to say, please confirm it's you, Ajay, who's trying to log in. And that is the 24-hour window, right? And every 24 hours we do this primarily to say, okay, even if my username and password is harvested out, I'm still protected because then they don't get access to my email. So these two things, again, easily to be done by yourself within your own computer systems. The top three we'll talk about in the next slide. Third-party risk, I wouldn't worry about this at this stage. This is slightly more complex. It's like if you're using, small and large businesses using third parties to manage their data and network, they need to go through some amount of cyber risk assessments before you engage with them. Data loss prevention, same thing. I would say go with encryption for now because you're a sole trader. This is for smaller and larger businesses where we can install software which will say if sensitive data is leaking from your computer and being copied and by someone else, right? The last area, cyber insurance, look into this space. For sole traders, there are some policies. There are cyber insurers that have tightened the screws around this whole insurance because there were about 30, 40 insurers last year. And the year before, it's now dropped down to a very handful. Like I think it's under 10 insurers now, because a lot of them have said this is not working. We are paying away too much of claims now. We have to tighten the screws. But as a business, if you are doing a lot of work, worthwhile having a look at it in terms of, it's like we talked about the medical insurance and stuff, same way for if you're storing data and if you get impacted, that could be a way to, safeguard any costs which are associated with a data breach.
Hey, AJ, I've got 3 questions coming through that are probably relevant to this page. Did you want to, have a quick...
Sure.
And also a chat question about 2-factor and mobile numbers and how they can be stolen, which can impact them.
Absolutely. So question is, the first one is, what's your advice when your browser asks you to store or remember your password for the next time? So the advice is, first of all, you've got Safari, you've got Chrome and Internet Explorer all offer this. So make sure those browsers are fully updated to the latest patch. Number one, always make sure that, because do not use any application or your operating system which is not patched, right? That's a good place to store your passwords. I use that with Google. So we use Google in our business. So most of my passwords are stored in that vault. And because entering into Google itself has a second layer of, so just by, if I would give you my username and password to log into my email, you couldn't, because it will force you to give the third factor, right? Sorry, the second factor. In our case, in some instances, we also have a third factor, right? Or we call that multi-factor authentication. So the answer to that question is you can store that password, but the moment you try and log in for another computer, then it should not let you do that, right? So make sure of that. That is extremely important, because if you go into your financial advisor's business and they use their laptop and you use don't store it on those laptops or computers. If you're doing it on your own, that's fine. And even when you log into your system, make sure you have a second layer of second factor to log in, so that way you're protecting yourself. If the laptop is stolen, at least you have additional level of security. Okay. So the next question is recommendations on robust cybersecurity insurance products for contract paraplanner. I'm sorry, I don't have a direct answer, but I will take that question I know a few brokers in the market. I will ask this question, and I will send the response to Melanie so that she can share it with her group. That's a very good question, and as I said before this presentation, we know about small business cyber insurance. There are quite a few, but for sole practitioners, I will have to come back to you on that question. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer. Okay. How safe is to use third-party cloud from like Trello for clients to upload their paraplanning work and communicate? So same thing, right? Any software as a service, Trello, Google, Office 365, first step in the process is making sure you have multi-factor authentication. So you can log into Trello using your Google ID or your Microsoft ID, right? But to get into the Google or Microsoft ID itself, you should make sure you have multi-factor authentication, right? So that if someone gets hold of that username and password, they shouldn't be able to log in without that third factor, right? Which is an SMS message or an app on your phone, right? So like I have Google Authenticator on my phone, it will auto-generate a number every time. And I've got multiple applications which offer Google Authenticator. Same way, there are other applications which offer Microsoft Authenticator as a third factor to log in. So please, this is the best thing you can do, right? If you don't do anything, at least do that, right? And at least password protect your Excel sheets. Switch on BitLocker on your Windows laptops, for example. So do these basic things, and obviously learn more about cybersecurity training. If you can afford a little bit more money, then you go into doing that monitoring, detection, and response, and also the training and the phishing campaign, right? So what we have done is we have launched this product called StickmanCyber Protect for small and medium businesses. So we, the price was initially designed for minimum 5 devices, but Melanie said that most of y'all are probably sole traders. So this is going to be changed. So normally if it's 5 devices, it's literally half the price. But if it's per device, then it's about $99.99 per month per device. And what it gives you is it gives you enterprise grade 24/7 monitoring, detection, and response for any cyber incident, endpoint detection. So what will essentially happen is we'll install a software on your PC, which then goes back to that back to base alarm system concept, right? So if there's any kind of cyber malicious activity or any incident, or we'll also run security scans on your system to ensure that it's clean. So that's where it gives you that peace of mind, saying that, okay, there's somebody watching and making sure there is nothing malicious happening on my computer or network. Then you've got the staff training that is also included. So we'll give you unlimited access to training and awareness. And every month, as you finish courses, new courses will be sent. And then we'll also do quarterly phishing simulations. So then you get to know what kind of simulations can be possible in phishing. And that's how you build a muscle around being a better cyber warrior, if you want to call it that way, right? Protecting yourself from cyber threats and attacks. So that is something you can look at in terms of investing. We will be speaking to Melanie. She may send out a link which you can click and register for this. So it's quite fairly simple. There's a landing page. You just go in there, you scroll down, you enter some details out here, and then you can click this 1 device per month for 36-month subscription. Or if you have 5 devices, then you get half the price. So, if few of your Paraplanners want to get together and do this, that's also fine, but it'll be linked to one particular email. So you'll have to figure out how best to do this. Or if you have home computers you want to protect, that can also be included. So it's not just business, it could be even home PCs and stuff. So you have this. Yes.
Sorry, just with that protection, I'm not sure, so forgive me if it's a silly question. Does this replace any virus software that you might purchase for your computer? So you don't need that anymore?
No, so the virus, so there is a difference. So this is what we have mentioned here. So antivirus malware protection is an essential tool. So don't uninstall it. So that's why we mentioned that here clearly. So you still need that. So think of it as the lock, right? If someone is able to break through that lock, that's when you need this 24/7 monitoring, right? That's your sensor, which is sensing for any other malicious activity happening in the house, right? So I'm using the analogy of the physical security world, right? So that's the distinction out here at the end of the day. And this page will give you a step-by-step instruction of how the service works and what you get out of it. And yeah, so we've got this special offer for you guys to consider, and then basically once you're happy, then we can go from there.
Thanks, Ajay. I had another question. I don't know, with 2 factors and mobile numbers, is your preference to use the authenticator apps rather than mobile number? We had a person in the chat, Ashley, said that her mobile was transferred to another provider and was used to maliciously access her bank account.
So I had my mobile number where it was moved to a different provider, reset my password, main intention, get money from the bank. Yeah, so very, very good question. Obviously, now the other question raises here is if you lose your mobile and those authentication apps are within that mobile too. So obviously, we have to take care of of ourselves, but many providers have moved away from the text message option now, right? Very few actually offer that. That's like a last line of defense, really. So there are quite a few mobile authenticator apps. In fact, Google has moved to that. Microsoft has moved to that. It's much more secure because it's linked back to your actual account rather than just a mobile number, and that's a completely different area. And though it may, in your case, it seems to have been quite easy to have transferred your mobile number and so on and so forth. It's not actually that easy in a mass scale, if that makes sense, right? It's probably an unfortunate incident which happened, but my recommendation is to use the authenticator apps rather than sign up for SMS-based notifications, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Ashley. If there's any other questions, otherwise I'm conscious it's lunchtime, so I'll put one more call out. Otherwise, thank you, AJ and Aya. I know you're on the line listening, for your time today to go through it. I think it's there's some really good things to think about, and even I've got some really good things I have to think about. And if you need some more information or you'd like to get in contact with AJ, just let me know. I can forward the information on. And I think AJ, you did record this, so I can provide that recording if you require it. And yeah, again, thanks AJ for your time. It was very informative and scary. So thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. All the best, and wish you all the best. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.